Hello, I'm Rhys Bowen. I write the Molly Murphy Mysteries, a historical mystery series set in early 1900s New York City, and the lighter, funnier Royal Spiness series, featuring a minor royal in the 1930s. I also write several big standalones, the latest of which is the Venice Sketchbook, and I love listening to the Dark and Stormy Book Club podcast.
Hello, welcome to Dark and Stormy Book Club. Today we visit with the author Jennifer Herrera. Enjoy!
I'm Ann Dart.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
The Hunter by Jennifer Herrera was released on January 10th of 2023 by G.P. Putnam's Sons. After reckless behavior cost NYPD Detective Leigh O'Donnell her job and her marriage, she returns with her 4-year-old daughter to her beautiful hometown of Copper Falls, Ohio. Leigh had stayed away for more than a decade, even though her brother and a trio of loving uncles still call it home, because while the town may seem idyllic, something rotten lies at its core. 3 men in town have drowned in what Leigh suspects to be a triple homicide. She hopes that by finding out who killed them, she just might get her life back on course. Headstrong and intuitive, Leigh isn't afraid to face a killer, but she has to do more than that to discover the truth about what happened to those men. She must unravel a web of secrets going back generations, and in doing so, plumb the darkness within.
We are pleased to welcome to the program Jennifer Herrera. She has a wonderful book out called The Hunter. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you for having me.
As my first question, I have to ask, since you're from Philadelphia and there's something kind of exciting going on. So we're recording this the day before the Super Bowl. How is it up there?
Wow, that is an excellent question. Like punctuation, people are using the phrase "go birds." Like it's like, "Hi, how are you doing? Go birds." Oh, have a good day. Go birds. I'm not even kidding you. You think it's an exaggeration, but people I think are really excited. I live in the Italian market area of South Philly. And so just with like a ton of great pastry shops. And all of the pastry shops are full out giving out
green, huh?
Everything is green. Jenny's Ice Cream is giving out free ice cream. There are free cupcakes. It's just like the whole city, I think, is just so excited. We saw some of this earlier this year when the Phillies were in the World Series. So we've had like a very exciting year. And also our soccer team was doing really well. So I don't know what it is in the air in Philly this year.
That's great.
Now on to why we're here.
Now, if we interview in a month, are you going to be twice as big from all this free stuff?
I mean, very possibly. But, you know, if it gets cold again, then I'll need that extra weight.
Oh, yes.
You know,
definitely.
to insulate me for the winter. So
little extra
work
layers. Okay, well, let's talk about The Hunter. I really like this book. It's one of those that it starts out, Leigh O'Donnell, she's a little messed up. She's got some issues. And not new issues. She's got old issues too. And she's called back to her hometown of Copper Falls, Ohio. She's going to help her brother solve the case of 3 young men who were found dead.
Mm-hmm.
And this opens a whole. It was very well written. It really
thank you.
was. You weren't sure what was going on because nobody was really who they were supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I did. I loved the uncles.
That is a popular opinion. And can I
Is
tell you,
that-
I in fact have 3 uncles.
Ew.
My mother does in fact have 3 brothers who are all from Cleveland. They're not Irish on that side, but it is funny to me, like when you get all of the uncles in a room together, they just sort of become tropes. You know, it's like this one's the funny one, and this one's the quiet one, and this
Do
one.
you get out your notebook and make notes?
I don't
Yeah.
have to because I know them so well and know the back and forth. And so the uncles in this book are not my uncles, but there are definitely some similarities. And I really wanted to capture that energy of like a big bustling family where people know each other well enough to rib each other, but at the same time, they have each other's backs.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Jennifer, I'm curious, with your schooling background and your literary agent background, does that give you a little bump up over other authors to know the ins and outs of your characters and what sells?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are 2 different parts to that question, right? There's like what school has done for me in terms of like helping my career versus what my job has done. My job has helped immensely. I am a literary agent. I'm at the David Black Agency in New York City. I've been in publishing for about 10 years, and it has been quite an education in terms of somebody who, when I started out, dabbled. I wrote in notebooks. It wasn't maybe the serious thing that it is now. And I had this very strong impression that if you just wrote a good book, that was enough. Then you write a good book and it gets published. And I thought people should be proud of me for getting to the end of a book. It didn't occur to me that it was the big thing that it is. And so one of the biggest lessons that I've learned through my job is just how much of a market it is writing a book to be published for an audience. If you want to write a book for your friends and family or for, a few hundred people, that is a very different feat. So one of the biggest lessons I learned through my job is just how important it is to know what books are selling right now and to know where your material fits in a marketplace, to know what it's similar to know readers of X will enjoy readers of Y, because the truth is that, most of your sales reps who are selling your book into bookstores have never read your book. They're counting on the judgments of all of these other people because they couldn't possibly read, 500 books a season or however many books they're selling at a time. And so they have to rely on shorthand. And so for my book, one of the shorthand is fans of Mayor of Easttown will love this book, like a very similar small town vibe, a similar imperfect protagonist. Someone else has said, like Tana French, but with a faster plot. Readers of Tana French will come to this book because booksellers need to know if there's an audience for this book when they go to put it on their shelves, because they want to sell books. That's their, that's the business that they're in. And so you need to support them so they're able to do that. And then the other part of your question about my education, I was in grad school for a really long time. I studied philosophy, which is not useful at all. I don't think it's useful, but I think what it did teach me, and this is maybe the more important aspect of graduate school, is it taught me that there really are no true experts. You go to school and you learn how to be a person who knows things and who is trusted and who has the right pedigree. And you get there and you're like, oh, all of this is fake. Like what you're doing is you're just reading a lot of books and then having an opinion about them and talking to other people who've read a lot of books and also have opinions. And like, that is what scholarship is, which is really empowering as an author, because you go into it being, for me, I've never been a detective with the NYPD, right? There are lots of characters who have jobs in this book that I've never myself held. And so what was empowering to me about graduate school was this recognition of, oh, that doesn't mean I can't write about this stuff. It means that I do what I learned to do in graduate school. I study, study, study. I talk to people, I get feedback, and then eventually I'll get it right. It's not as though I'm barred from this area of writing about, like in this case, a detective, because I haven't had that job. There are no real experts. Even the people who have that job have all had different experiences of that job.
Well, that's a great way of looking at it, because from what all these years that we've interviewed authors, we find that most of the work that goes into writing is the research.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to write a quality book, because we also have talked to, like, say, a cozy author who says when it comes to police work, they just kind of skate over it. You know, they don't really mention details. The police are just there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also love cozies, and I see that in cozies, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a place and a time for any of them.
Now, my question is, first of all, you look like you're about 12. So
Oh, that's
how
so
can
wonderful. I'm not. I'm very much not.
how can you be in the business for 10 years and
Oh,
finish
wow.
graduate school?
How old am I? Well, first off, I never finished graduate school. I'm ABD. I never did my dissertation. How old am I? And I'm 37.
Wow. You've got good genes.
Maybe it's just kind lighting.
And the other question is, how does a literary agent find a literary agent?
That is a
that's
good question. So in this case, I work in the business, and so I was really nervous about sending out something I'd written to other agents in the business. I thought, if this is terrible, they're all going to judge me. So much of being in a business setting is having this sort of persona, right? This persona of being successful. And I was afraid that if I sent a bunch of people in the business something that wasn't any good, then I would hurt my chances of being a good literary agent for my clients. And so I sent it to one trusted friend, a trusted friend, by the way, who has told me when I've had bad ideas in the past. She's very gently, put it. But so I knew that if I sent it to her, she would tell me the truth. And so I sent her the manuscript and I said, listen, I love you. I don't want you to represent me at all. I just need you to tell me if this is garbage. And if it's garbage, you need to be the one to tell me, right? Don't let me fall flat on my face. And so she came back to me within like a day or 2 days or something, some short amount of time. And she said, I read it and I love it. I want to represent you. And I said,
Wow.
absolutely not. We're friends. This is a terrible idea. And then we just talked for a really long time. I think our phone call was like 3 hours.
Wow.
And she was very persistent. And at the end of 3 hours, she said, I understand your concerns, but there's nobody who will work harder for you. And I believed her. And so I said, okay. And that was it. So it was one of
Wow.
those situations that it sounds very much like a fairy tale, but you have to remember like all of the work that I've been putting in for 10 years to build up those relationships with people in this industry, not in a malicious way, not in a way like I want to use them, but it was the fruition of something that was 10 years in the making.
That's a wonderful story.
Yes, it is.
Her name is Heather Jackson, and she's at the Heather Jackson Literary Agency. She's wonderful.
Well, let's talk about The Hunter.
Great.
Where did you get the title from? I know in the book what The Hunter is, but is this based on local fairy tales or lore, or is this just something you dreamed up in your smart little head?
I think that one of the interesting things that, something that draws me to this story is this idea of like human psychology. You have a protagonist, Leigh, who's made all these big mistakes, right? And she doesn't know why she's made these big mistakes. And she's unreliable in a way that's different from maybe how we're used to reading about unreliable characters. She doesn't have a medical condition that means her experiences are not to be trusted. She doesn't have an alcohol addiction or a drug addiction. She's just somebody who's really, really human. And she's told herself a story about her life that may or may not be true. And so to get at why she's told herself a certain story, you really have to dig into human psychology, right? Why do we create stories about our own lives? And why are those stories inaccurate? And so to help me answer that question, I looked to Jungian psychology. And again, I've never taken a psychology course in my life. I've never taken a creative writing course in my life. But because I'd been in grad school and I knew how to research, I knew how to go about getting answers to these questions. And when I was looking at Jungian psychology, I found this archetype, right? An archetype is a myth, like a myth that extends over cultures and over time, right? Like a lot of fairy tales have archetypes in them because the idea is, according to Carl Jung, humans think in pictures before we think in language. And this makes sense because language comes to us later in our lives than images, right? Images are primal. And so because of this, there are meanings that we have in our heads that we don't necessarily have language for. And so sometimes when we are encountering a recurring symbol, it is a recurring image that we just haven't put to words yet. And so once we can put to words what the meaning is of that symbol, we're able to understand our own psychologies. And so when I was reading about Jung, I was reading about this symbol of the hunter and what the hunter as an archetype means. And I thought, oh, this describes my protagonist. Like this describes the journey that she's on. And so then it was, how do I make something that's metaphorical into something that feels real, that feels like it could be a piece of the plot? And so that's when you got this element of the plot, which is this shrine to what they're calling the hunter and her search for it. And you realize that her search for this actual shrine is actually a search for this metaphorical thing that she's looking to attain to figure out why she's done what she's done.
Oh, okay.
That's very interesting.
Now, will this be part of a series?
Yes, it will be part of a series.
Oh,
I'm working on the second book. The second book is under contract.
Do you have a title?
I do, but I can't share it because it's not approved. If it were approved, I would share it to everybody, but it's probably going to change unless the publishing gods anoint this title and say this is okay.
Well, one of the things that you did very nicely in this book was your not red herrings, but your twists. I am somebody who reads a book as a puzzle. My quest is to figure it out before the end of the book. And until that one twist, and you know what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking about.
I had completely wrong just about everything in this story. And you just went boing the other way.
That makes me so happy, by the way. Thank you for saying that.
It was really, really good.
And let me tell you something, Jennifer. This is a woman that reads. First of all, I have a job. She's retired, so she has a lot more time than I do, but it doesn't matter. Even when she had a job, this woman reads nonstop. So to surprise her, that's saying something.
Yeah.
That makes me very happy.
So the backstory with her personal life, that she's trying to deal with separation. She doesn't want it, but she doesn't want to stay in New York. You felt her anguish. It was very, very well done. And like I say, that one twist just woo. I wasn't expecting that one.
Well, the one thing that we haven't done is I always like to hear the author's elevator pitch of this book, because I'd like to hear what you think. If you were going to sell this book to our listeners, what would you say?
What would I say? So I think that, there's the synopsis of this NYPD detective who makes this big mistake and doesn't know why she's made it, and has to go back to her hometown in order to figure out her own psyche so that she can improve her relationship with her husband, who, there's the separation. And also so she can get her job back if that turns out to be something she still wants. If I were pitching this like selling points, I think one of them is one I already mentioned about an unreliable narrator who is unreliable in a way that doesn't feel gimmicky, but it feels earned. It's not unreliable in a way that I can't relate to, because I don't have an alcohol addiction. I don't have a drug addiction. I don't have a medical condition that means my experiences aren't to be trusted, but I have in my life told myself stories about certain events or about certain people that don't end up being true. And I do it as a way to protect myself, but sometimes it backfires. And so wanting to understand how we can make sense of those stories that we also tell ourselves. And I think the other selling point, again, like if I were coming at this from an agent wanting to sell this to a publisher or to readers, is that this is a story where no female characters die. And I think that is significant because, especially if you're somebody who reads a lot of these books, you're very used to reading, okay, here's another instance of a woman being raped, or a woman being maimed, or tortured, or kidnapped, or you name it. And I don't know about you, but for me, it can be, I don't want to say triggering, that's maybe too strong, but it's something that I don't enjoy necessarily reading about all of the harm coming to women, especially when, if you look at the statistics, you see that 80% of homicide victims are men. So why are we reading about so many dead women?
Absolutely.
And so I think one of the selling points of this is that here's a book that inverts the normal structure, where it's not the case where you're having a man detective come on the scene and avenge this beautiful young woman. It's not this very, I want to say, like medieval tale of the knight in shining armor coming, with the lady in the tower. It's the other way around. The woman has the power. The woman is the one with the insights. Her insights are not necessarily based on rationality as much as they are based on intuition, this extra sense that I think some women report feeling. And so for me, you have a female detective who feels very powerful, and powerful because she's a woman, not in spite of it. I think that for me as a reader would be a really big selling point.
Wow.
Well, it was interesting when we first started the interview and Mom was talking about we're mother and daughter. She was saying about the 3 men being killed. Right away, my head went, oh, well, that's different. You're right. And another thing about the stories you tell yourself, that is so true, because I read the book Freakonomics, and they talk a lot about that you can convince yourself of your own story. You can change your history if you want.
Yeah.
And in your head, you really think it.
And we do it all the time.
Yeah.
We do it all the time. I mean, I'm sure as mother and daughter, you can go back and you can say, hey, remember that time when we, and you both have
We
different
didn't do that. Now, my question is, are there really caves all over area?
Oh, I wish. So the book is set in Northwest Ohio, which is where I'm from. So I did that because I knew the locations. Like I knew how far Toledo was away, and I knew about getting to Michigan and the drive from Michigan to Ohio. And I felt like I could represent that aspect of it really accurately. But in order to have, I think, some of the depth, no pun intended, that I wanted for this book, I wanted to have waterfalls and caves, and a cave could be a symbol, again, an archetype for your unconscious. And so Leigh, to understand her unconscious motives, has to literally descend into the cave. And so those aspects I actually stole from Hocking Hills, Ohio, which is full of waterfalls, and it is full of caves, even though the caves there aren't necessarily as deep as what we're looking at in this story. The caves in Hocking Hills are relief caves. So they're caves that are almost like overhangs, like very, very large overhang. But I think some of the natural beauty that I wanted to encapsulate in these descriptions, I got from my experiences at Hocking Hills when I was a kid.
I hope everybody reads it, because it is an excellent.
It's on my list. I haven't had a chance yet.
Yeah, I'm going to give her my copy and she can read it. Well, Jennifer, it was delightful to talk to you.
Oh, it's been so nice.
And definitely contact us when that second book comes out.
Oh, thank you. I absolutely will.
Definitely.
Just so we
And
can read it.
good luck with the Eagles tomorrow.
Go Birds.
Don't celebrate too much now. So,
I didn't even think I'm going to watch the game, but don't tell anybody in Philly.
Yeah.
Well, you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You guys too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.
Trivia. Last week's question is, which author created the charity Save the Libraries? A. Karen Slaughter, B. Jane Winspear, C. Martha Grimes, or D. Robert Ludlum? The answer is A. Karen Slaughter. Karen Slaughter is a library advocate and founded Save the Libraries, a nonprofit organization that campaigns to support U.S. public libraries. The Save the Libraries Fund has provided more than $300,000 to the DeKalb County Public Library in Atlanta, Georgia. This week's question is, C.J. Box won what award for his first novel, Open Season? A. The Anthony, B. The Macavity, C. The Gumshoe, or D. The Berry? Good luck. Well, that wraps up another episode. We thank you for listening, and we hope you join us next week. And remember,
Life would be boring without a little mystery.
bye.